Wednesday, everybody. It is May 19th, 2020, and welcome everybody to an all-new Downrange Sports. And I'm your host, Brent Reed, and it is showtime, everyone. For those of you that's sitting at home, we hope that you're all been doing well. I know the country is starting to slowly open like a little flower, but we hope you guys are still being safe, staying 6 feet apart, wearing your mask, wearing your gloves, washing your hands, and just being courteous so we can all beat this thing together, because one nation got sick, not one person. So let's remember that. Today's show is a special show, as today we will break down something pretty cool. Today's show, we're breaking down the top 10 ultimate NFL quarterbacks of all time. I should have a bigger thing. I'm probably going to do that, so I have sound effects and everything right here. Cool. So basically, we're going to go through this first segment. We're going to count 10 through 6, and then the second segment, we're going to do 5 through 1. To make my list, you had to play in the Super Bowl era, and you had to make my list. Let's be clear, I'm a sports critic, so I basically made decisions based on quarterbacks I would want on my franchise. I ran it past my guru when it comes to football, the wise Uncle Buddha, and he said, hey, that's your list. I may not agree with it, but it's your list, and that's what I respect. If you feel the same way, you know what you can do? I tell you what you can do. Just leave a comment. Leave a comment. I'll read your comment, and if I like it, I may even talk about it. With that said, let's get this thing going. Moving to, starting with the lucky number. Go ahead and hit it. Number 10. The one, the only Warren Moon. Warren Moon, you say? Why? Because Warren Moon had a big arm. Moon did not, he's the only guy on this list that was not drafted, believe it or not. Went through the whole entire NFL draft in 1978. Nobody picked him up, so he took his talents not to South Beach, but to Canada, where he would go to Canada, he would ball out. He would win 5 championships in Canada, including 2 Grey MVP awards, Grey Cup MVP awards, and then even 1 Outstanding Player of the Year. He would come back to the United States, where the Houston Oilers would welcome him in open arms, and he would play and ball out in Houston for many years. He would play in Houston from 84 to 93. He would also, while he was there, win 7 Pro Bowl appearances. He made a first-team All-Pro. He was an Offensive Player of the Year. He was an AFC Player of the Year. He was also the NFL's Man of the Year. He also, while he was there, had 2 NFL passing yard titles, and he also was a touchdown leader while there. Eventually, he would go on to play for the Minnesota Vikings, the Seattle Seahawks, and he would wrap his long career playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. I always remember seeing Warren Moon like, wow, that guy's just been around, but he just was there. Big arm quarterback that if he played in today's NFL, maybe the best quarterback in the league. He used to, little fun fact about him, he would file his nails a certain way, so when he would throw the ball, it would have a cool little spin on it, and he would have a nice, beautiful spin on the ball. What's the word I'm looking for? The rate for me, I can't tell. Let's move on. Number 9. He is the youngest guy on this list. He may be on this list again in 10 years from now. He may be on this list 20 years from now. He's the only Patrick Mahomes. The baby assassin, if you will. Patrick Mahomes, why did he make the list? Well, I'll tell you. In only his second season as a starter, won a Super Bowl, threw over 50 touchdowns once, won an MVP, won a Player of the Year, won the Super Bowl MVP, not to mention has a winning record already with his team, and is one of 3 black quarterbacks, are you ready, to win the Super Bowl. That's right, he put him on a list with Russell Wilson and Douglas Williams. Douglas Williams. Okay, I can't think of his name. Any case, Patrick Mahomes is a guy that you have to look at right now. If you're starting a franchise, you really got to go, oh, I want him. You got first pick, and you don't pick Patrick Mahomes first, there's something wrong with you. And in the mortal words of some people, kill yourself, because this kid is the bomb diggity. Did I just say that? That was sad. Patrick Mahomes, he has all the ability to be the face of the NFL if he's not already the face. He's already being compared to the one, the only Michael Jeffrey Jordan because the kid balls out. He has highlights after highlights, and he embarrasses people constantly, whether it's with his arm or with his legs. So we wish him all the luck, and we hope he keeps playing. Number 8. He was number 4 on a lot of people's heart, but he was number 8 on my list, and that's the one, the only Brett Favre. Brett Favre, as some people will call him, got drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, but they didn't want him, so they traded him to Green Bay, and from there, the legend was born, the gunslinger, if you will, the last of his kind. Brett Favre, the day he got to Green Bay, the day he started, he was the starting quarterback for that franchise from 92 to 2007. He would play over 297 consecutive games between Green Bay, the Jets, and Minnesota. Yeah, sad. The Jets one we all want to forget about. He had a bunch of stuff. There was some pitchers involved. But in Minnesota, he would return and help the team ball out. He couldn't get them to the Super Bowl when he ultimately wanted to, but he tried his best. He does have a Super Bowl on his resume. He's 11-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first team, 3 MVP awards. You gotta give him credit for that. Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year, NFL Offensive Player of the Year. 4 times he led the league in touchdowns. Twice he led the league in passing yards. And not to mention, he also leads the entire league. He has the most interceptions on his record too. Can't discount that because Brett Favre was an all or nothing guy. He was basically a buckshot. Shoot it and spray. Pray and spray was the Brett Favre mantra. But the game where he basically showed his pure skill and his heart for the game was the game in the Monday Night Football game in 2003. He would lose his dad. Or his dad would have a heart attack and die in a terrible car crash. Brett Favre the next day would show up, go into Oakland, and dime out. He would throw 9 consecutive passes to start the game, not to mention 4 touchdowns in the first half, just to throw it out there and just blow out the Oakland Raiders in that emotional game for Brett Favre. So that's why that man, the Mississippi King, is on the list. Moving on, number 7, Fran Tarkenton. Fran Tarkenton is a guy, he's the only guy on this list I want to say that's just as the Super Bowl era is created. Fran basically was drafted by Minnesota and drafted by the Boston Patriots, who was not in the NFL, but was in the AFL. But he chose to go to Minnesota. He would play for Minnesota from 61 to 66. Then he was traded to the New York Giants from 67 to 71. And then guess what? He was traded back to Minnesota from 72 to 78, where he probably would have his best years. Fran was a 9-time Pro Bowler, an MVP, Player of the Year. He is 8th all-time in wins. He is 10th all-time in touchdowns. The guy hasn't played in forever, over 40-something years, and he's still in the top 10 in 2 huge categories, just to show you how skillful he really was. Fran Tarkenton had a huge arm. He could get that ball down the field just as good, better than anybody. But where he was different from a lot of guys of his era, he had wheels. A lot of players that are compared to him, Michael Vick, Cam Newton, and Patrick Mahomes, if you will, Fran was the predecessor to all of those guys, to a quarterback that can move and throw. Fran, not to mention, was a very smart man. He went to do Monday Night Football, and then he would be on a show called That's Incredible. Then he decided, well, that's not enough. I'm going to form a software company called Tarkenton Software, where later he would merge with another company, KnowledgeWare, and then finally in 1994 they would sell the company to Sterling Software. Now my uncle doesn't own that company, I wish he did, but he would eventually. And so Fran at 80 years old is just sitting at home, basically probably looking at his money going, I don't know what else I can buy. You can send it here, Fran. So we congratulate Fran for making the list. And I checked it twice. Moving to wrapping up this one. At number 6, well, he's got 4 Super Bowls. He's the first quarterback to win 3 and then win 4. He's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. He's a former league MVP. And he was an actor, or still is an actor. Well, he's got a SAG card. He's Terry Bradshaw. The man that you watch on TV every day that's the Charles Barkley of football. Terry Bradshaw was the man in the NFL for years. He might have been Tom Brady before Tom Brady or Joe Montana before Joe Montana, because he, like I said, won 4 Super Bowls. Now, he was more of he was basically the pilot of the ship, because their defense in Pittsburgh, that steel curtain, was really the bread and butter of that whole thing. So he just had to not break anything. Just keep us on the field and don't mess up. So he did that. 15th all-time in wins, 36 in touchdowns. Guys, he didn't have to throw it that much because his defense, like I said, did enough. But he did just enough to be impressive to make sure he would lead the team. 4 Super Bowls as a starting quarterback on any franchise is going to put you top on anybody's list. So we put him 6th on the list. His acting chops, you say? Well, he was in Cannonball Run, Smokey and the Bandit 2, Failure to Launch. He also made appearances on Everybody Loves Raymond and Malcolm in the Middle. And up until 2008, he was the only NFL player to have a star on the Walk of Fame, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That's pretty impressive, if you ask me. So that by itself got him top on the list. Not really, it was his playing credentials. So, numbers 10 through 6, if you will. Warren Moon, Patrick Mahomes, Brett Favre, Fred Tarkenton, and Terry Bradshaw. Those are the guys that made the list. Now, when we come back, we're going to wrap it up 5 through 1. Downray Sports. All right. So, if you just tuned in, which would be weird because it's one show, this is the Downray Sports top 5 ultimate quarterbacks of all time. So, we're kicking off with number 5, the one and only Drew Brees. Brees was actually a Charger. Believe it or not, Drew Brees could have played somewhere else by accident. The Chargers, the year Drew Brees was drafted in 2001, actually had the number 1 overall pick, but chose to trade it with the Atlanta Falcons so they could get the number 5 pick. The Falcons would get the number 1 pick, ultimately drafting Michael Vick. And then the Chargers would draft LaDainian Tomlinson, Hall of Famer. And in the second round, the second quarterback picked up in that draft was Drew Brees in the second round by said Chargers. Brees was playing the Chargers until 2004, 2005, when the Chargers had to draft another quarterback out of nowhere, and the name of Phillip Rivers. Well, there was a lot of hubbub going on because the new head coach down in Miami, the Nick Saban, had a choice. Trade for Drew Brees or trade for Dante Culpepper. Dante Culpepper was fresh off of knee surgery, had won an MVP award a few years ago, but he chose Dante. Brees would go to the Saints, and then, as they say, the rest was history. Drew Brees is a 13-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Player of the Year, Sports Illustrated Player of the Year, AP, Associated Press Male Athlete of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year. 7 times he's a passing leader, 4 times he's a touchdown leader. The man has over 547 career touchdowns to 237 interceptions. You ready for this? Most career passing yards. Most 5,000 season passing yards. Most completions. Most touchdowns ever. Most conversions in a game with a touchdown. Most consecutive games with a touchdown. Fun fact, I think I already gave you the fun facts. He has so many stats, I got crossed. Drew Brees did something that nobody think he could do. He brought a Super Bowl to New Orleans. And he basically became the face of that city and that franchise. That city went through a lot after Katrina, and it looked like the city was never going to bounce back. And it was that Saints team, led by Drew Brees, that not only gave hope to a city, but almost gave hope to a region, because a lot of places was torn up by that. Drew Brees, without a question, on the first game of the upcoming NFL season, will play Tom Brady, the 2 oldest quarterbacks to face off as starters ever. And the question is, how much do they have in the tank? Drew Brees last year proved he's still got a lot, and so does Tom. Moving on, number four. I actually had to switch these two, little inside baseball. This man is, believe it or not, played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Nobody realizes that. But before that, he was drafted by the USFL, a league formerly owned by Donald Trump. he would be drafted by the Los Angeles Express. Only play a season because the team would fold, and then he would be picked up by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But believe it or not, he was actually drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals. Oh, damn it, who am I talking about? Steve Young. Steve Young, the only reason why he didn't go to the NFL is because the Los Angeles Express in the USFL offered him $40 million. But the league really didn't have that kind of money, so he actually told him, hey, spread it out over the course of 40 years, and I will make the money up because I'm that good. Young eventually would end up being traded from Tampa because Tampa decided they wanted a different quarterback. They wanted Vinny Testaverde. Bad choice. He would go to San Francisco where he would watch and sit behind the learning tree of the one, the only Joe Montana. But when they were tired of Joe, here comes Steve. And what did Steve do? Well, he won him a Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl MVP. He's a 7-time Pro Bowler, 2-time league MVP, 2-time league player of the year. Tied 24th in wins. Potentially could have had more, but he didn't play. But he was a bench warmer for a while. But are you ready for this? 7th in the highest passing rating, 7th all-time highest passing rating at 96.8. Most times he led the league in passing ratings. Most consecutive times he led the NFL in passing ratings. One of 7 quarterbacks to lead the NFL in touchdowns. Most passing attempts in a playoff game, 65 versus Green Bay. It's a lot of passes. Most touchdowns in a Super Bowl or playoff game, 6. Most rushing yards by a quarterback in the postseason, 594. Not even Vic, not Cam Newton, not Fred Tarkenton, nobody. I think Patrick Mahomes probably, no, you know who's going to probably catch him? Jackson. And then most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in the postseason, 8. Jackson will probably catch that. The guy's a beast. He's a monster. He played for so many, I mean, it makes me wonder what happened with that team, why they couldn't he kept them in contention. They had winning season after winning seasons, but why they only got 1 versus more. Now, technically, there's 3 on his resume, but he was a bench warmer for 2 of them. So, I got to give him just the 1. But without a doubt, Steve Young was the man. Moving on. Now, if it wasn't for Tom Brady, there's a possibility this man would be considered one of the best to ever, the greatest to ever play. Up until one point, he was considered the greatest to ever play because his brain was just far beyond any other quarterback in the league. That man is the insurance man himself, Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning was drafted first by the Colts, 2-time Super Bowl MVP. He has 2 Super Bowls in his closet. He also is, he's only a 1-time Super Bowl MVP. Yeah, but he's gone to the Super Bowl 4 times. He lost to the Drew Brees, and he lost to the Saints, and then he would lose to the Seahawks one season. But then he would win. He actually went out on his horse with it. 14-time Pro Bowl, 7-time first team, 5 MVP awards. One season he actually had to split it with Steve McNair. I think it was a bunch of crap that she just gave to Steve McNair. Whatever. He's a Sports Illustrated Man of the Year. And then it breaks down like this. Most touchdowns in a season, 55. Oh, not to mention he did 50 twice. Most passing yards in a season, 5,477. Most touchdowns in the game, tied with Breeze at 7. He's the only quarterback with 7 straight 12-win seasons. Are you kidding me? Not Brady, not Breeze, not Montana, none of these guys. Because he had his team, regular season-wise, he was the greatest quarterback. Postseasons where things got a little bit different. And basically, you ready for this one? Fun fact, first quarterback to beat all 31 teams. But not to be outdone, Tom Brady would do it that same day. Oh, and then not to be outdone, Brett Favre would do it the following week. So, it's better to be first, I guess, right? But without a question, Peyton Manning, you put him on anybody's team and he made them better. Why do we know that? Because he proved it in Denver. Denver was like, why? And then he goes out there and he just made them better. Moving on, we're down to our last 2. You may know them. Let's see if you can guess them. At number 2, Cool Joe Montana. Well, Joe's is pretty easy. He never lost in the Super Bowl. In fact, he's never lost a championship. He went from winning the national championship for Notre Dame to winning 4 championships for the San Francisco 49ers. The game where it was almost like his Jordan-like game was the catch, where he throws it, he beats the Dallas Cowboys and throws it to Dallas Clark, I think his name is. Dwight Clark, excuse me. Those are to Dwight Clark. They make the catch, the miraculous catch, and from there, the guy becomes the man. 4-time Super Bowl winning quarterback, 3-time Super Bowl MVP, 8-time Pro Bowler, 2-time MVP, 1990 Sports Illustrated Player of the Year, 2-time Associated Press Athlete of the Year, NFL Comeback Player of the Year. He's 11th all-time in wins, 17th all-time in touchdowns. None of that stuff mattered because the guy was, the clock is up. None of that stuff mattered because that guy had the gift. In fact, he still is the only quarterback to never throw an interception in the Super Bowl. Wow. That's pretty impressive. He almost should be number 1, but unfortunately he can't because the guy that's ahead of him has more Super Bowls and has more records and is still playing. It wasn't traded to another team. He chose to leave his team because Montana had to go play for the Chiefs. Enough said. Number 1 is, let's recap first. At number 10, the one, the only Warren Moon. At number 9, Patrick Mahomes. At number 8, Brett Favre. At number 7, Fran Tarkenton. At number 6, Terry Bradshaw. At number 5, Drew Brees. At number 4, Steve Young. At number 3, Peyton Manning. And at number 2, Joe Montana. And that brings us to number 1. You heard him. Sound effect in here, please. The man that we all love. Or some of you have to hate. Because he's so great, you either hate him or you love him. That is Tom freaking Brady. Tom Brady, a guy who was drafted basically in the basement, was some bum nobody knew about, and then Drew Bledsoe got hurt, and then all of a sudden, well, a legend was born. Let's just look at his list, all right? Most Super Bowls, 6. He's gone to Super Bowl more than any other quarterback. He's lost 3, 6-3 in the Super Bowl, pretty impressive. He went to 3. He won the Super Bowl back-to-back twice, okay? So he won it in 03, 04, back-to-back. 2016, 2017, back-to-back. And then went to 3 straight, 2016, 17, 18. All right? The last quarterback to do that was Jim Kelly, and he didn't win any. Respect, Jim. Respect. Tom Brady pretty much owned 2 different decades. He owned the early 2000s, where he would win 2001, 2003, 2004, 2007, and he would go to the Super Bowl, and they would lose to the Giants. And then, all right, then the teams came along. They would lose to the Giants again, but then that was it. They would lose to the Eagles too, but who cares? They would go to the Super Bowl in 2011, 2014, 16, 17, and 18. Yeah, he pretty much closed out the decade, right? So now we got the new decade coming up, and it's curious what he was going to do in Tampa. Most wins as a quarterback. Most games with 2 touchdown passes. He's thrown touchdowns with more plays than anybody in history, over 77. Because Tom Brady, unlike a lot of guys, only had 1 Hall of Fame player he's ever played with, or 2. Randy Moss, they didn't win the Super Bowl, and Gronkowski. Most of the Super Bowls, Gronkowski was hurt. He has the best touchdown to interception ratio of all time. Ready for this one? Most wins on the road, most wins at home. If that doesn't put you at the GOAT, I don't know what will. He's the oldest quarterback to lead the league in yardage. He's the oldest quarterback to win an MVP. Oh, not to mention, I'm not even going to bring up all his playoff numbers. I'm just going to put a picture on the screen for you guys. Here's said picture. Yeah, you read it for yourself. I'm not reading all that stuff. Tom Brady is without a question the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. Where did he win me? The game against the Atlanta Falcons. They were down 27-3, and then they had to turn around winning the game. Now, yes, the Falcons did half the work by just, crapping the bed. But for him to will his team back, for him to say, yo, let's go, this ain't over, that's Jordan-like, kids. And that's why Tom Brady is, without a doubt, the GOAT. And if you don't respect him for that, then you need to reevaluate what you think is greatness. Because, yes, Joe Montana might never threw an interception in the playoffs. And, yes, he may never lost a Super Bowl. But he didn't go to 9. And he didn't win 6. That's all I got to say. You go to more, you're probably going to have a few errors here and there. All right? Hey, that's it. That is 10 through 1. That is the Downrange Sports Ultimate Quarterback List. If you got an issue with it, leave a comment and tell me what you think. Thank you all for listening to music today, of course, by the one, the only Uncle Buddha. Subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Google Play. Go to our Twitter. Go to my Instagram. Check out our Facebook page. And then respect and shout out to the one, the only DJ Chase. Check out his Instagram for his page and his Worldwide Sounds, where he has a bunch of new music that's just been released right now. So go peep that out. And then we'll check you guys out. Hey, stay safe. Be quarantined. Be on the lookout for another Downrange Sports show. Definitely be on the lookout for a new podcast this Sunday. And you guys have fun out there and wash your hands and deuces.